Hey, this is Eighth House Dharma, a place where we talk about living embodied, sensual, spiritual lives, and we explore the realms of eroticism, tantra, and transformation. I am your host, Laura May. So happy new moon in Virgo. Today, we're going to talk just a little bit about working with Virgo archetype and the energies of this season in an alchemical way, right? As a support, how we work with that on the spiritual path. And that's kind of what I'll be doing every month. We'll kind of take the energy of that season. And then really dive in. So it's not so much like a forecast. I'm not covering the particular astrology of what's happening this month, but we're more looking at how we work with the seasonal energy on our path, right? Okay, so first things first, who is even walking a spiritual path, who is even exploring darker aspects of their psyche or sexuality or desire, or who is wanting to transform some stuck pattern, right? So Virgo archetype, the priestess, also relates to the hermit card in the tarot. We can think of the Virgin not from a sense of lack of experience or this whole like virginal purity bullshit, but from a sense of wholeness, from a sense of fullness. And there's also a real beauty in this fullness because there's a humbling that comes in with Virgo after Leo, after the kind of brazenness of like, I get to be sexy, damn it. Then there's this humility that comes in of like, and what do I do with that profound wholeness? Like I have something to offer, I serve, and there's also this constant refinement. Okay, so if we think about that in the eighth house, if we think about that kind of as we start to work with aspects of our own psyche or aspects of our relational dynamics that are challenging, Virgo is the place where we can get a little stuck on like perfection, that there's some way that this should happen, and it's not good enough yet. And so the more that something like that gets entrenched and gets stuck, there's just less room for alchemy, right? That's like step one in coming into Dharma, right? And coming into the fluidity, to the emptiness of phenomena and of self. That's what allows any kind of transformation in the first place. So if I'm coming with the view of wholeness, and if I'm extending that sense of perfection to actually mean like the inherent perfection, the inherent divinity in everything, then phenomena becomes very, very, very workable, which is very different than using the word perfection as a kind of ideal that no one can reach. And then I'm down here, and there's all these ways I need to serve and work and serve and work and serve and work and serve and work in one day. That setup is usually what stifles a lot, right? So sometimes people have strong Virgo in their charts, and instead of kind of living up to that, the ideal, the kind of cliche that goes around of Virgo of like, you're very meticulous, very precise. Sometimes those people actually will be quite like slovenly and not really taking care of their surroundings, of their body, of their work, because the idea of perfection is so unreachable and unattainable that there's a sense of like, why even try? Okay. So that's the opposite. That's the opposite of where we want to be going, on a path of alchemy, on a path of transformation, or on a path of tantra, right? Where instead I'm sitting in a fluidity of self-view, sitting in that sense of like the hermit priestess, right? Like already whole, already connected in the perfection, and then the service or whatever change is happening. It's not with this sense of like pushing something away or grasping at something. Does that make sense? I think sometimes there's this sense that if you really allowed and deeply loved the thing you're trying to change, that you would just be complacent about it. But that's usually really the opposite of what happens. Right? So I'm thinking like this is just a super, super practical example. When I was really young, I lost a ton of weight. I was actually like a very, very heavy young person, right? And I didn't do that like hating myself or hating how I looked or having a sense of like, oh, there's this really particular kind of body and I'm going to get that. I'm using this example because a lot of times what Virgo brings in the kind of embodied spiritual path is our relationship to our physical health, right? So what actually happened for me was I was a young woman, I was in high school, and all of a sudden I made a new like best friend. And I started dating someone at the same time. And it was just like all of a sudden I felt really loved, probably for the first time. And from that place of feeling like good about myself, I quickly recognized like I had to wipe away the sense of perfection that we have around bodies. It'll look like this. This is a big fucking problem, especially in a lot of like yoga asana communities, right? That quickly gets linked into like eating disorders and this like that somehow the goal is actually this, you have to be sculpted in this certain way. Not the goal. Not the goal. What does it mean to live an embodied life, right? So then that whole path for me of transformation was actually just this kind of act of love. It was an act of love, and it was a refining of myself and noticing the more energy I had, like the more vibrant I was for the people around me, right? So I wanted to just offer that. So that's kind of the first piece, is like who is doing anything, right? And in Virgo season, play with the sense of like, whew, what if I'm engaging this refinement from a place of deep wholeness within myself and seeing sanctity and divinity as what I'm working with. Not, oh, this is a really bad thing, I'm pushing that away. This is a really good thing, I'm bringing this in. But just it's so much more fluid when it's simply like actually what's working. Yeah. Okay, two. What's working? Okay, so Virgo and kind of sixth house energy. This is really like, how are you doing? I'm going to say your spiritual path, because that's what this podcast is about. That's what we're talking about here. Virgo also really is dealing with like your life's work, how you do your life's work, right? How you do your health, how you do your routines. So what are those, right? And the real question is like, are they friggin' working? Like what are the kind of day in and day out things? And do you have a practice of checking up to see if that's actually working? I love how anytime we think about one energy in the zodiac, we really have to think about its partner. So Virgo opposes Pisces. So in Piscean energy, we have that place where you have these more imaginal insights. And that's so much of the world of transformation right now. Like so many people doing a lot of psychedelic medicine journeys, which is beautiful and profound. And in my opinion, practically worthless if you don't actually integrate that into your life. I can't count the number of people I've known who in an addiction to intensity are like, MDMA, psilocybin 3 days later, this big intense thing 3 days later, this big intense thing, and then this big intense retreat, and then this big intense retreat. And then in the interim, they're like staying up till 3 a.m. every night watching Netflix and eating pizza. And like, that's not inherently bad, but if you take your amazing, insightful, meditative experiences, and then in between them, you have a day-to-day rhythm, Virgo, that promotes, that is a behavior of depression, a behavior of anxiety, a behavior that perpetuates separation, you're not living the amazing potential of awakening that you have when you have these insights, right? So Virgo is like, give it this season, wow, the harvest, right? It's the time where we're receiving harvest. Our actions are they've bared fruit, right? We're receiving those fruits. But to do that, it's kind of like the chop wood, carry water, right? In that Zen koan, like, what happens after awakening? Well, you go back to chopping wood and carrying water. That's like, what are the day-to-day rhythms that promote remembering who you actually are, that promote having an approach to this emotional addiction or this physical addiction or this pain point that actually like brings that in, that brings that into like a bigger field of love. Yeah. In a lot of ways they're in the what, right? So who's doing the work? What work are you doing? Do you have what are your daily routines? What are your daily practices? It's so important. What you practice every day is what you become. It's so important. Many of us get daily practices from a lineage, and that's an aspect of Virgo archetype around lineage and mentorship. It's part of that humbling, of that like the humility that comes is looking to a mentor, right? That kind of beauty of apprenticeship, of deciding to kind of like humble yourself and apprentice yourself to someone who knows because they've walked that road. Yeah. And again, it doesn't need to be, I often like to think of routine actually as rhythm. Some people are really, really, really allergic to routine. There's a sense of like, I don't know. I have 6 planets in water in my chart. So I like to think of it more as kind of a flow, right? Like you brush your teeth every morning because it would feel gross if you didn't, not because it's a routine and you put it on a list and you need to do it. There's like ooh, right? If you work out regularly, you know that when you stop doing that, you actually feel bad. So you do it because it feels really good, right? So like, what are the day-to-day rhythms you have that create positive feedback loops of remembrance, of like cultivating your spiritual values? Yeah. Okay. So we covered who is even walking this spiritual path, right? Can we totally redefine this sense of like a goal and a perfection is somewhere out there, right? Can we walk the spiritual path from this place of wholeness? What are you doing? What are you doing every day? What happens when you first wake up in the morning? What happens when you go to bed? Don't get overwhelmed trying to like revamp your whole day. You take one tiny little thing, like, hey, how does that work? You have to constantly be checking up, right? Lama Yeshe used to say, like, Dharma is making the decision, but the decision is literally every moment. So what's the flow of my day? What's the flow of my routine around my physical health, around my mental, emotional health, around my spiritual health? Do I have something that supports me in the moments in between the really great conversations I have with friends, or the really great book I read, or the meditation practice I have, or the dance practice that I have? Like, what are the supports, right? What's the weaving between that? Okay, that's 1, that's 2, 3. How are you doing it? How are you acting? Is it working? Okay, so one thing that like, oh God, it breaks my heart, but more than that, it infuriates me, are how many people come to spiritual lineages, right? Yoga, meditation, kind of more new age, like transformational worlds. They humble themselves, they take the practices, but then no one is checking up on like if those practices are actually appropriate for you, right? Have you been doing a certain thing for 5 years and actually not getting the fruit of it because it wasn't quite the right thing for you? And the sad thing is that a lot of times people are kind of just selling paradigms that's like, hey, I wrote a rubric, take my rubric, do my rubric, and not actually having the integrity to be a true mentor, not having the integrity to be a true teacher, to check up, right? And so people end up like so burned. And I know so many of you that I've talked to, like as I've kind of yeah, been like gestating this. It's just been the same conversations over and over, being burned in different lineages, or just feeling like, oh gosh, I did this for so long, but then, ooh, all these kind of shadow pieces came out. And actually, like I wasn't getting the fruit. I wasn't getting the result. Yeah. So then there's this constant like checking up of like, okay, how am I going about doing what I'm doing? Is there an attitude of like self-aggression? Is there an attitude of like, this can come in so strong with Virgo energy and it's so unnecessary and so heartbreaking? Is there an attitude of like, oh, I'm horrible and I'm over here and somewhere over there I'll be a different person and that's the kind of, I'm going to work so hard to get there? Is there a way that you're either checking up on yourself, or a lot of times, honestly, this has to come from people around us, right? This has to come from like Sangha or from a mentor who has some integrity, who can see, mentor or mentors, right? People are kind of really like having some attunement. I'm like, okay, for the past year, I've been working with anger, or I've been working with, whatever it is, just think right now in your heart, top 3 things that feel like obstacles to you in living a sensual spiritual life. I'm really stuck on one. I'm stuck on one. I'm stuck on a certain like emotional addiction I have. You know what yours are. You've got them, right? So then it's like this checking up of like, what practice is actually the skillful means to meet this? Did I get lost in being of service? Did I actually get lost in chopping wood and carrying water and forget to see if that was the right thing I should be doing at this moment? Is it actually like working? Right? I love Clarissa Pinkola Estes when she's just like, wisdom is what works. God, it's such a Virgo statement right there. Wisdom is what works, is what you are doing working. And that's not like an overcomplicated, esoteric question. Yeah? Like, I don't know. I know I've been in a habit of meditating in the morning and the evening for many, many years. If I don't do that, I feel a little off. If I stay out and I drink too much wine one night, I just like don't feel as good going to bed. That's not needing to like problematize wine or act like, or like vilify it or push it away or hold meditation up on this pedestal. It's just like a subtle like tuning, like, oh, like that one glass is fine. And then like there's like a certain place where I tip in and it just like doesn't feel as good. I'm not, I don't have access to the places I want to have access to. So simple. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. That's it right there. Those are some ways to play with, explore this season, this Virgo season, mutable earth sign, right? We're making it material. It is material. We don't have to make shit. Okay. And with this material, how are we working it? How is it working? Mutable, changeable, right? That we can change. Okay. Who's doing it? Are we in our wholeness? Can we just imagine that? Even if you don't feel it, can you imagine it? What's going on every day? What are the daily rhythms? Is there one little way I want to take a bite out of like, ooh, my morning routine, or I don't know, the way I'm eating lunch? Am I just like eating too quick? Is there a way that that simple act of eating lunch could become a prayer? Such a Virgo activity to find ways that even these like simple things throughout our day become a prayer. Yeah, so just getting curious. And then how is it working? Is it working? Did you try one thing and then, oh, actually, that's not really the thing that I need to be doing. I could do it this way. I love how just stupidly practical it's just so, it's like the how we get anything done. How you get anything done, you have to do it with in your material body regularly, regularly, right? Okay. And so that was all like some practical stuff on the path. We're going to take one last kind of more meta bite. Just feeling your body for a moment, and feeling like any little any like sticky places that came up as you were listening to this, where you're just like, oof, oof, oof. Okay. The kind of shadowy parts of Virgo, right? Where I feel like really not perfect enough, not good enough, didn't cut it. Where there can be a lot of judgment toward self, toward others who are also aren't doing it perfectly, can catch a lot of judgment where there's really strong, where this energy comes in really strongly. So just like feeling that in your body, like wherever. And just like with a few breaths, allowing that to be a little more fluid, allowing that to be a little less solid and a little more fluid. Because that's how it actually is existing, right? There's an emptiness there, which actually makes it workable. And with a few more breaths, just an invitation to play with now and through the rest of this month, weaving love into all those parts of yourself, right? If you feel disappointed in yourself because you don't have the right daily routine, if you feel disappointed in yourself because you still have some like physical or emotional addictions, who gives a weave some love into it. Weave divinity into it. And the reality is you don't actually have to weave shit because it's already there, but you do have to turn your mind to look for it, or turn your body to look for it. Yeah. So it's such a paradox, that practice of like, whoa, there's this like inherent beauty and love and wholeness all around me. But if I'm not seeing it, if I'm not experiencing that, then how do I use my embodied behaviors to create rhythms that allow me to perceive that? Yeah. So the invitation is to really like bring the view into the action. Yeah. Thanks for listening. You can check me out at eighthhousedharma.com. If you're curious about spiritual mentorship or direction, or having some astrology readings, and you kind of like my vibe, you can click on the link that I will put in the comments, and you can reach out. Okay, until next time.